19th, 1993. Liberty Tree, pages 46 to 47.
What was he to do, alone among these fierce men, with thirst? But as he thought of his camel and the father and mother he loved so well, a sudden resolve sprang up within him. He lay quite still till he was hushed in the camp. Then, whispering a few words in his camel's ears, he noiselessly mounted and stole away. On he went through the silent night with the faithful camel under him and the silent stars above. As he went, and he prayed to the God of his fathers to bring him safely through the desert. At last day broke, and Ali saw all around him nothing but the vast expanse of sand. Toward noon he became so faint with thirst that he nearly dropped off his camel. He felt that very soon there would be nothing left to do but lie down and die. Just as the camel plunged forward a little faster, straining his eyes, Ali saw in the far distance the top of a palm tree. But the camel had seen it first and was now hastening on. In a short time, both were having a long drink from a well which gave trees and fertility to a small oasis in the desert. After a refreshing sleep, Ali awoke, and now noticed the marks of recent steps upon the sand. He knew that a caravan had been there just before him. He pushed on as fast as he could, and shortly after dusk he saw the welcome blaze of campfires. Soon he found himself one of a circle of camel drivers who gave him food and drink and listened to his tale. Happy were Ali's dreams now that he felt his troubles were nearly over. He was awakened by the shouts of drivers and the tinkling of camel bells from a new party, which had just reached the well. As he lay listening in a sleepy fashion to these new sounds, he heard a voice that made him jump from the ground. Could he be mistaken? No, it was the sound of his father's voice, and in an instant he was in his father's arms. Hassan had waited at Suez for some time, but as Ali did not come, he thought there had been some mistake and started for home. What a joyful meeting there was a few days later when Ali told his tale to his mother, who lifted up her thought in thankfulness to the great Father who had brought her son safely through so many dangers.
Frontiers to Explore, Lesson 11, page 123 through 126. Chester Parrott.
Simba stepped at once into the clearing, calling out the strange name he had so often whispered to himself. Jack, Jack, Jack. Jack heard the warning cry, stood staring at Simba open-mouthed. The startled buffalo heard the cry too. He lifted his great head and gazed questioningly at this unexpected enemy. Simba raised his bow. The feather of the arrow swept his cheek. Then the arrow flew toward the great black beast. When he felt the prick of the arrowhead, the buffalo gave an angry bellow and swept toward Simba at a terrible speed. With the buffalo's hoofs thundering in his ears, Simba ran as he had never run before. Nearer and nearer to the tree Simba raced. Then he leaped. His desperate fingers clutched at the slender branch. As his body swung upward, the buffalo passed underneath him, and the wind of his passing was like the chill of death.
Page 124.
Jack had scrambled up the side of the rock by now. He sat on the top looking across at Simba and the city. The buffalo, roaring angrily, stood guard between the two. Now that the terrible danger was past, Jack wanted to thank the stranger for saving his life. "Say," he shouted, "you're the fastest runner I've ever saw. I guess I would have been deader than a doornail if it hadn't been for you." Simba's stomach felt weak with the excitement and relief. The wonderful white boy was talking to him. To Simba, it would be only polite to answer.
Page 125.
So in the quick singing rhythm of his own language, he shouted back at Jack. Jack did not know what Simba was saying, and Simba did not know what the white boy was saying. But it was fun anyway, talking back and forth. The angry bellowing of the buffalo reminded the boys suddenly that they must call for help. They shouted together. Jack had been missed from the camp, and the boys heard an answering shout almost at once. Then for a moment all was silent. The two boys sat waiting anxiously, looking at the buffalo below. He stood with his great head raised, sniffing the air, while his sharp eyes searched the jungle for any new enemy. Suddenly a gun roared nearby, and the huge beast crashed to the grass. As he went down, a tall white man stepped out from the jungle. At his heels were two gun bearers. They moved watchfully toward the fallen buffalo, eyeing him with careful signs of life. But the giant body did not stir. He was dead. Then the white man shouted, and at once the jungle air was filled with the cries and calls of many voices. The porters and gun bearers crowded into the clearing, all chattering excitedly. Then Jack's mother and father rushed in.
Page 126.
Carefully, Jack and Simba climbed down, the one from his rock and the other from his tree. Jack had scarcely touched the ground when his mother caught him in her arms. Frightened with the noise and excitement, Simba started to slip away into the jungle. But the tall white man grabbed him by the arm and led him into the circle where Jack and his parents stood. "That's the boy, Mother," pointing at Simba, cried Jack. "That's the boy who saved my life." Then Jack told them what had happened. He looked at Simba admiringly. "I never saw anyone run so fast in all my life." Then Jack's father turned to one of the gun bearers and asked him to question Simba in his own language. Simba told him how, for many days, he had watched the white men's camp. Then he told them how he had followed Jack when he left the camp today. Then quite simply he said, "When I saw that the white boy was soon to die, I stepped out from where I was hidden. The buffalo chased me to the tree. The white boy climbed up the rock to safety. That is all. I am finished talking." As his listeners followed the story, looking at the rock and then at the tree, they realized how narrowly Simba had escaped death. Jack's father was puzzled. Why should this young African risk his life to save an unknown white boy? Then he turned to the gun bearer and said, "Ask the boy why he did this." Then, when the gun bearer asked Simba this question, the boy thought for a moment. Then he said quietly, "In my village there is a man who is a teller of stories. He is very wise. Once he told me great dangers makes all men brothers. When I saw that Jack was in great danger, he became my brother, and I did what I did."
Liberty Tree. Lesson 77, 12, 1393, page 240 and 241, Chester Parrott.
"But I was young and had my dreams, and something within me told me that this would not and could not last, that I should someday get a better position. Then again I felt myself no longer a mere boy, but quite a little man. A change soon came, for a kind old Scotsman who knew some of our relatives took me into his bobbin factory before I was 13. Here for a time it was worse than in the cotton factory, because I was set to fire a boiler in the cellar and actually to run the small steam engine which drove the machinery. The firing of the boiler was all right, for Fortunately, we used wooden chips instead of coal, and I always liked to work in wood. But the responsibility of keeping the water right and running the engine, and the danger of making a mistake and blowing the whole factory to pieces, caused too great a strain, and I often awoke at night to find myself sitting up in bed trying the steam gauges. I never told the folks at home, however, that I was having a hard tussle. Everything must be right to them. This was a point of honor, for every member in the family was working hard except, of course, my little brother, who was then a child. We were telling each other only the bright things. Besides, no man would whine and give up. He would die first. There was no servant in our family, and several dollars a week were earned by the mother, who bound shoes after her daily work had been done. Father was also hard at work in the factory, and could I complain? My kind employer, John Hay, peace to his ashes, soon relieved me of this strain. He needed someone to make out bills and keep his account, and finding that I could write a plain schoolboy hand and could cipher, he employed me as his only clerk. But still I had to work hard upstairs in the factory, for the clerking took but just a little time. People moan about poverty as a great evil, and it seems to be an accepted belief that if people had plenty of money, they would be happy and useful and get more out of a rule. As a rule, there is more genuine satisfaction in life and more obtained from life in the humble cottages of the poor man than in the palaces of the rich.
Flags Unfurled, Chester Parrott, page 125 through 127, lesson 101, 128.94.
I am only what you see, a dog with 4 paws, but my heart is a human heart, a better one indeed than most men possess. Sorrow has taught me much, and I have suffered much. I suffer even at this moment because I am not able to express to you, in words like your own, my goodwill and affection. Yes, I am devoted to you, and I love you with the faithful love of a dog. I would die for you if necessary. Your property is my sacred trust. If anybody meddles with it, let them look out for themselves. But notwithstanding, we quarreled with one day, and it was a bitter disappointment to me. Those who put their trust in dogs will understand my feelings. This is the way it happened. The cook had killed 2 pigeons. I will serve them with tea, she said to herself. She went into the storeroom to get a basket in which to put the feathers as she plucked the pigeons. When she came back into the kitchen, she cried out in alarm. One of her pigeons had flown, and yet she hadn't been gone from the room more than 2 seconds. A tramp going by had undoubtedly thrust his arm in through the open window and stolen the bird. She rushed out to capture the tramp. Not a soul to be seen. Then she thought to herself, the dog. But she seized at once with remorse. She mentally added, what a shame to suspect Hero. He has never stolen a mouthful. Why, he'd stand watch all day over a leg of mutton without smelling it, even if he were hungry. Moreover, there he is, still in the kitchen, lazily sitting on his haunches with half-closed eyes, yawning from time to time. No, he's thinking precious little about my pigeons. True enough, there was Pierrot, half dozing, seemingly utter indifferent to all going on about him. I would call. Pierrot! He turned his sleepy eyes toward me as if saying, eh, what did you say, master? I was too comfortable. I was just thinking of the ball. Ah, of the ball, said I. And then to the cook. I'm of your opinion, Catherine. Hero did not steal your prison if he had. He would be busy plucking it at the bottom of some ditch or other. You may depend on it. Nevertheless, look at him, sir, said Catherine. That dog hasn't the look of an honest Christian. What? Would you say? I say at this very moment he has a guilty look about it. Look at me, Pierrot, I said sharply, hanging his head a little bit. He at once replied, in a somewhat grumbling tone, Should I be quietly sitting here if I had stolen your pigeon? No, certainly not. I should be busy plucking it. He is serving me with my own argument. This looks suspicious. Look at me, I ordered him, straight into my face, like this. He put on an air of indifference. There was no longer any room for doubt in my mind. I turned sorrowfully to Catherine and exclaimed, Ah, what a pity! It is he who is guilty, I am sure of it. It is he. I assure you, reader, that I am very serious when I say that what I saw in the eyes of the dog came upon me like a painful shock. I had distinctly seen there a human life. He had tried to throw a false appearance of sincerity into his look, and had utterly failed, for it is impossible even for man to do it. As for Pierrot, he exhausted himself in vain efforts. The deep desire to see was in his very eyes, struggling with the feeble showing of sincerity which he was succeeding in bringing into play.
Enchanted Isles, Lesson 138, page 107 and 108, 3/22/94, Chester Parrott.
Suddenly Walter heard the younger soldier shout, Stop, you! Are you blind? See that hat on the pole, you? That's the hat of Austria, the ducal hat. Why should I bow before a silly hat? A hat is not a lord. A hat is a thing of rags and feathers. It is nothing to bow down before. The mountaineer held his son tightly and shouted these words so all heard. The townsfolk milled around and the soldiers in a crowd. Poor wretch, he'll get it now, said the visitor. Take your hands from me, commanded Till as the guard listened. I have done no wrong. Take your hands from me, I say. I will not bow before that hat. We've had enough bowing and scraping in the land of Uri. As they heard his scornful words, three angry soldiers grabbed the mountain man and pinned back his arms. We dare you to insult the governor thus, you herder of goats. A bugle sounded again. The crowd scattered as mounted knights galloped into the marketplace. Out of your way! Out of our way, you dumb brutes, they commanded. Walter, almost in tears now, glanced up at them. And when he saw Gessler, the Governor Gessler, it could be no one else. The knight wore fine clothing and beautiful and spirited horns, but Walter thought he looked evil. What goes on here? Demanded Gessler. The crowd was now deathly quiet. Oh, so it's you, William Tell, the man of the mountains, jeered Gessler. In trouble again, I see. For what do my men now hold you? The mountaineer did not reply. Then the soldier spoke. He will not bow down before the ducal hat, my lord. Oh, he is too fine to bow before the hat of Albrecht of Austria, is he? Bow, I say, or we will run you through, warned Gessler. Tell was silent. He did not move. He looked at Gessler, and his eyes were like black coals burning with hatred. Walter trembled, but he held himself proudly like his father. You have no tongue now. Speak, or you will be sorry. Now the great bowman was really angry. He bellowed like a mad bull. The people could hear every word that he said. I will not bend my knee before a hat. I will bow only to those more truly noble than I, men of gentle birth, wise men, the man of God, and the good Lord himself.
Chester Parrott. Enchanted Isles, Lesson 153, 42594, page 338 and 339.
Sam was waiting for him at the sled, with 11 mighty huskies at their harnesses, anxious to be off. Better meet some of your dogs, Sam said. This first one's the leader is Mutt. He's been to the Yukon before, and he knows the trail. The tawny big brute lowered its head and watched Steve with suspicion. Steve fought down his fear and leaned close to pet the dog, its fangs bared in a snarl. Not too close, Sam warned. Mutt doesn't know you yet, and you better stay clear of Cougar, this big nail mute. He's a big troublemaker. Why is the sled tied to a tree? Steve asked. Because otherwise they'd be off like a flash and we couldn't stop them, Sam explained. He pointed to an iron rod suspended above the ground at the rear of the sled. It looked like a narrow rake. There's your brake. You step on it and the prongs dig into the snow and stop the sled. They packed, and Steve got onto the top of the sled. Hold on, Sam warned as he untied the rope from the tree. The dogs were off, 11 big brutes harnessed in pairs, except for Mutt, who took the lead. They raced over the snow in full gallop. The sled bounced and flew, and it took all of Steve's strength to hold on. Standing on the runners in back, Sam gave a hearty laugh. Dogs are always wild to get started. They'll soon slow down. They did. For hours they went, skirting great slopes of spruce and Norway pine and on into the still white wilderness. At midnight they stopped for a few minutes rest and a bite to eat. Now you drive, suggested Sam. I'll run behind a while to get warm. But whatever you do, don't fall off the sled. You'll not be able to stop the dogs, and you'll lose them in the sled and all your food. It's not a good way to die. Steve leaped on the runner. Get going, he shouted. Mutt turned his head back and looked at him, but nothing happened. Holler, Mush, Sam suggested. When you want to go right, holler G, and for left, up. Swing the sled round corners so it doesn't tip. Steve nodded. Mush, he screamed, and it worked. He stood proudly on the runners. He was driving a dog team. There was real work to it, he soon discovered. Keeping the sled upright at curves was tricky, and he had to be careful to avoid the stumps and rocks that might smash the sled. On the down slopes, he stood on the brake to keep from running over the dog, but suddenly it happened. He made the mistake of looking back too long at Sam, who was jogging half a mile behind him. He hit a slope, and his feet slipped from the runner, but he held on, dragging as the sled gathered speed downhill until it pushed the dogs forward in a wild, scrambled heap. Then the sled stopped.
Is Kent's adopted name.
Does it say if the Andersons have any children?
Yes. It says that 3-year-old Kenneth Anderson was put in a foster home until his next of kin could be found. Kenneth? Kent? Well, it's awful close to be a coincidence.
Mr. Whitaker.
What's wrong, Lucy?
Here on my screen. I found a photograph of the Tate house taken a few years before it burned down.
Really? Can I have a look?
There.
I don't believe it.
Looks exactly like Wit's End.
Connie?
Yeah, Scrub?
Everyone's leaving the train room.
They are. Is the train broken?
No, they're scared.
Scared? Why?
There's a man up there, and he won't let anybody play with the train. Will you make him go away?
A man. This is some kind of trick, isn't it?
No!
Okay, I'll go take a look. fast the wreck.
I don't care.
Look, some of the kids want to play with the trains, and, well, you know, they're mostly for kids, so if you don't mind...
He talked to my uncle today, didn't he?
You mean Whit? Well,
I knew it. I knew it. Somehow he always knows. He always finds me.
It's really none of my business, so maybe I'll just go back downstairs.
I want to come home. Do you understand? This is my home.
We all feel at home here.
Don't patronize me. Why can't I make you understand? It's my uncle, isn't it? He told you things. Lies.
Honest, he didn't tell me a thing.
He'll say anything to make me stay with him.
Maybe that's because he loves you and then wants to take care of you.
He said I'm crazy, didn't he?
Crazy? Why would anyone say a thing like that?
Because sometimes I think I'm crazy. I keep having these dreams about this house. Why don't you believe me?
I really think I should go back downstairs.
No. Wait.
Let go of my arm.
Listen to me.
You're hurting me. Stop it. Help!
Phew, if I didn't see it with my own eyes, I would never have believed it.
Wit's End. A burned out Wit's End.
Amazing. Except for the church tower, it's identical.
The charred walls, fallen beams. It's creepy.
Creepy, yes, but even more puzzling.
Why?
Well, because of Kent. You know, considering his uncle says he's crazy, everything he's told us is proven to be true. Oh, watch out for that hole.
Thanks. So you think Kent isn't crazy?
I don't know what to think.
What was that?
I don't know. The wind, I hope. Maybe we should leave.
Good idea.
Go, Lucy.
Look out, Mr. Whitaker! Mr. Whitaker!
Oh, no! On opposite ends of Odyssey, Whit and Connie are in danger. What will happen to them? You can find out next time when we discover the truth about the mysterious stranger. Thanks for listening. If you ever want to get in touch with us here in Odyssey, the address is Odyssey, Colorado Springs.
Frontiers to Explore, page 123 through 126. Chester Parrott.
Simba stepped at once into the clearing, calling out the strange name he had so often whispered to himself. Jack, Jack, Jack. Jack heard the warning cry and stood at Simba open-mouthed. The startled buffalo heard the cry too. He lifted his great head and gazed questioningly at his unexpected enemy. Simba raised his bow. The feather of the arrow swept his cheek. Then the arrow flew toward the gray-black beast. When he felt the prick of the arrowhead, the buffalo gave an angry bellow and swept toward Simba at a terrible speed. With the buffalo's hoofs thundering in his ears, Simba ran as he had never run before, nearer and nearer to the tree. Simba raced. Then he leaped. His desperate fingers clutched to the slender branch. As his body swung upward, the buffalo passed underneath him, and the chill of his passing was like the chill of death. Jack had scrambled to the side of the rock by now. He sat on the top, looking across at Simba sitting in the tree. The buffalo, roaring angrily, stood guard between the two. Now that the terrible danger was past, Jack wanted to thank the stranger for saving his life. Say, he shouted, you're the fastest runner I ever saw. I guess I would have been deader than a doornail if it hadn't been for you. Simba's stomach felt weak with the excitement and relief. The wonderful white boy was talking to him. To Simba, it would only be polite to answer. So in the quick singing rhythm of his own language, he shouted back at Jack, Jack did not know what Simba was saying, and Simba did not know what the white boy was saying, but it was fun anyway, talking back and forth. The angry bellowing of the buffalo reminded the boys suddenly that they must call for help. They shouted together. Jack had been missed from the camp, and the boys heard an answering shout almost at once. Then for a moment all was silent, and the two boys sat waiting anxiously looking down at the buffalo below. He stood with the great head raised and sniffing the air, while his sharp eyes searched the jungle for any new enemies. Suddenly a gun roared nearby, and the huge beast crashed to the grass. As he went down, a tall white man stepped out from the jungle. At his heels were his two gun bearers. They moved watchfully toward the fallen buffalo, eyeing him carefully for signs of life. But the giant body did not stir. He was dead. Then the white man shouted, and at once the jungle air was filled with the cries and calls of many voices. The porters and gun bearers crowded into the clearing, all chattering excitedly. Then Jack's mother and father rushed in. Carefully Jack and Simba climbed down, the one from his rock, the other from his tree. Jack had scarcely touched the ground when his mother caught him in her arms. Frightened with the noise and excitement, Simba started to slip away into the jungle, but the tall white man grabbed him by the arm and led him into the circle where Jack and his parents stood. "That's the boy, Mother," cried Jack, pointing at Simba. "That's the boy who saved my life." Then Jack told him what had happened. He looked at Simba admiringly. "I had never saw anyone run so fast in all my life." Then Jack's father turned to one of the gun bearers and asked him to question Simba in his own language. Simba told them how for many days he had watched the white man's camp, and he told him how he had followed Jack when he left the camp today. Then quite simply he said, "When I saw that the white boy was soon to die, I stepped out from where I was hidden. The buffalo chased me into the tree. The white boy climbed up to the rock to safety. That is all. I am finished talking." As his listeners followed the story, looking at the rock and then at the tree, they realized how narrowly Simba had escaped death. Jack's father was puzzled. Why should this young African risk his life to save an unknown white boy? He turned to the gun bearer and said, "Ask the boy why he did this thing." When the gun bearer asked Simba this question, the boy thought for a moment. Then he said quietly, "In my village there is a man who is a teller of stories. He is very wise. Once he told me, 'Great danger makes all men brothers.' When I saw that Jack was in great danger, he became my brother, and I did what I did. That's all."
Testing.
Pauline.
Hey. Doodle-doo-doodle-doo-doo. Doodle-doo-doo.
of America, Volume 2, Lesson 137, pages 158 through 159, and page 163. The Art of Friendship by Wilford A. Peterson. The first step in the art of friendship is to be a friend, then making friends takes care of itself. To be a friend, a man should start by being a friend to himself, and being true to his highest and best by aligning himself with the enduring values of human life that make for growth and progress. To be a friend, a man should strive to be like the shadow of a great rock in a weary land, to be a source of refuge and strength to those who walk in darkness. To be a friend, a man should strive to lift people up, not cast them down, to encourage, not discourage, to set an example that will be an inspiration to others. To be a friend, a man should be sensitively responsive to the dreams and aims of others, and should show sincere appreciation for the contributions others make to the enrichment of his life. To be a friend, a man should practice companionship of silence, may build and not destroy, help and not hinder. To be a friend, a man should be himself. He should be done with hypocrisy, artificiality, and pretense. He should meet and mingle with people in quiet simplicity and humility. To be a friend, a man should be tolerant. He should have an understanding heart and forgiving nature, knowing that all men stumble now and then, and he who never made a mistake never accomplished anything. To be a friend, a man should go more than halfway with his fellow men. He should greet others first and not wait to be greeted. He should radiate a spirit of overflowing goodwill. To be a friend, a man should remember that we are human magnets, that we attract light, and that we give what we get. To be a friend, a man should recognize that no man knows all the answers, and that he should add each day to his knowledge of how to live the friendly way. Wit and Wisdom of Mark Twain. It is better to keep your mouth shut and appear stupid than to open it and remove all doubt. Let us endeavor so to live that when we come to die, even the undertaker will be sorry. The principal difference between a cat and a lie is that a cat has only 9 lives. They spell it Vinci and pronounce it Vinci. Foreigners always spell better than they pronounce. In India, cold weather is merely a conventional phrase and has come to use through the necessity of having some way to distinguish between weather which will melt a brass doorknob and weather which will only make it mushy. Noise proves nothing. Often a hen who laid an egg cackles if she has laid an asteroid. Wrinkles should merely indicate where the smiles have been. The reports of my death are greatly exaggerated. Lesson 162 of America 2, page 235 through 238. And what dead can't come to life, I think. So friends, we are not the folks to shrink from the duty of giving you something to drink and a matter of money to put in your poke. But, as for the guilders, what we spoke of them, as you very well know, was in joke. Besides, our losses have made us thrifty. 1,000 guilders. Come, take 50. Piper's face fell, and he cried, "No trifling, I can't wait. Besides, I have promised to visit by dinner time Baghdad and accept the prime of the head cook's pottage, all he's rich in. For having left the callous kitchen of a nest of scorpions, no survivor with him I proved no bargain driver. With you, I don't think I'll bait a stiver. And folks who put me in a passion may find me piped to another fashion." "How?" cried the mayor. "Do you think I'll brook being worse treated than a cook? Insulted by a lazy ribald, with idle pipe and vesture piebald. You threaten us, fellow, do your worst. Blow your pipe till there you burst." Once more he stepped into the street, and to his light again laid his long pipe of smooth, straight cane. And ere he blew 3 notes, such sweet, soft notes as yet musician's cunning never gave the enraptured art. There was a rustling that seemed like a bustling of merry crowds jostling at pitching and hustling. Small feet were pattering, wooden shoes clattering,
little hands clapping, little tongues chattering, and like fowls in a farmyard where barley is scattering, out came the children running. All the little boys and girls, with rosy cheeks and flaxen curls, and sparkling eyes and teeth like pearls, tripping and skipping, ran merrily after the wonderful music with shouting and laughter. The mayor was dumb, and the council stood as if they were changed into blocks of wood, unable to move the steps, or cry to the children merrily skipping by, and could only follow would-be-eyed that joyous crowd at Piper's back. But how the mayor was on the rack, and the wretched council's bosom beat, as the Piper turned from High Street to where the Wester rolled its waters, right in the way of their sons and daughters. However, he turned from south to west, and to Koppelberg Hill his steps addressed, and after him the children pressed, great was the joy in every breast. He never can cross that mighty top, he's forced to let the piping drop, and we shall see our children stop, when lo, as they reach the mountainside, a wondrous portal opened wide, as if a cavern was suddenly hollowed, and the Piper advanced and the children followed, and when they were in the very last, the door in the mountainside shut fast. Did I say all? No, one was lame, and could not dance for a whole of the way, and in after years, if you would blame his sadness, he was used to say, "It's still in our town since my playmates left. I can't forget that I'm bereft of the pleasant sights they see, which the Piper also promised me. For he led us, he said, to a joyous land, joining the town and dust at hand, where waters gushed and fruit trees grew, and flowers put forth a fairer hue, and everything was strange and new. And horses, the sparrows were brighter than the peacocks here, and their dogs outran our fallow deer, and honey bees had lost their stings, and horses were born with eagle's wings. And just as I became assured my lame foot would be speedily cured, the music stopped and I stood still and found myself outside the hill, left alone against my will, to go now limping as before and never hear of that country more. Alas, alas for Hamelin! There came into many a burgher's pate a text which says that heaven's gate opens to the rich at easy rate, and the needle's eye takes a camel in. The mayor sent east, west, north, and south to offer the Piper by word of mouth. Wherever it was, men lot to find him, still bring gold to his heart's content, if he'd only bring the way he went, and bring the children all behind him. But when they saw 'twas their lost endeavor, and Piper and dancers were gone forever, they made a decree that liars never should think their records duly after the day of the month and year. These words did not as well appear, and so long after what happened here on the 22nd of July, 1376, in the better in memory to fix the place of the children's last retreat, they called it the Piper Street, where anyone playing on pipe or tabor was sure for the future to lose his labor. Nor suffered they Hall Street or tavern to shock with mirth a street so solemn, but opposite the place of cavern they wrote the story on a column, and on the great church window painted, to make the world acquainted how their children were stolen away. And there it stands this very day. And I must not omit to say that in Transylvania there's a tribe of alien people that ascribe the outlandish ways and dress on which their neighbors lay such stress, to their fathers and mothers having risen out of some tyrannous prison, into which they were trepanned long ago in a mighty band out of Hamelin, New Town, in Brunswick land. But how or why they don't understand. So Willie, let me and you be wipers of scores, not with all men, especially pipers. And when they pipe us free from rats or from mice, if we promise them aught, let's keep our promise.
Adventure Lands, page 32 through 37, lesson 6, Chester Parrott.
put up a kind of fence of sapling trunks across the entrance, which he hoped without much certainty would keep out the snake. The sun began to drop into the west. Surely before it went he could find the river or the creek. Even if he had to camp again for the night, he would be on his way home in the morning. Once more a stubborn streak in him conquered the urge. That was so boring and tiresome, this was the right thing to do, and he would just go on doing it. He ate the 2 small forelegs of the rabbit for supper, and what was left with only the back and the head, even they seemed to have shrunk. He threw more wood onto the fire and signaled more eagerly than ever. Down went the sun and down. The air grew cooler. The birds of the day began to prepare for bed. Martin built the fire higher, and a cloud of sparks had danced up. It was a bitter disappointment that what he had seemed such good sense hadn't brought any reward. The twilight was sad. He took a burning branch and inspected his bedroom. Things scurried up in the darkness above. They would come down when he was asleep and run over him. He felt thoroughly miserable. And then a dog barked. Martin didn't believe his ears. It barked again. A fox? A dingo? Some mimic like the lyrebirds? He turned back from the black hole of the tree and pawed the last of the fuel he had gathered on the fire. "Coo-ee," he called, though he couldn't get it right. It was heartening to hear his own voice going out toward the barking dog, if it were a dog. "Coo-ee," an echo from the empty hills? No, that wasn't his own feeble effort flowing back at him. It was a genuine coo-ee, crisp and sure as the crack of a whip. He had been found. The relief of it brought tears to his eyes, but he wasn't going to be rescued, blubbering like a scared townie. He threw on the fire the barrier he had made against the snake. The flames roared up, burning a great red cave in the darkness. Into the red cave bounded Blotto, Bill's dog. He was a one-man dog, but now he was delighted to see Martin. He leaped up at him and woofed and stroked him with his paws. No need to save the rabbit now. Martin darted into the tree, unwrapped what was left from his shirt, hacked the head off, and gave it to Blotto, much to Blotto's delight. He himself began to gnaw the back. He was still eating when Bill rode into the brightness of the fire. Bill looked very grim and savage, getting up to his big mare. "Martin," he growled, "you're 10 times more trouble than Uncle Luke." But though he sounded cross, he was delighted to see Martin, and intensely relieved. To Martin's amazement, Bill, the tough bushman, drew his finger across his nose and gave a big sniff. His eyes were bright and shining. They took in the whole scene. The leaf bread spread in it, the hollow tree, the fire which had been burning for hours, the blackened branches which had been waved through the smoke, and Martin still automatically munching away the last of his roast rabbit. "Water?" he asked. "There's a small spring down there. That's why I decided to stay here, particularly after I shot the rabbit." "With that rifle?" "Yes," said Martin. "I aimed at a yellow one, but hit the one next to it." "Then that must be the secret of the worn old barrel. Aim 6 inches to the side, whichever sided it was." Bill jumped down from his horse. He looked big and firm in every inch a bushman. "You shouldn't have gone and got bushed, Martin," he said. "But when you done it, you certainly showed some sense. Tell us what happened." So Martin, feeling almost as tall as Bill, told him the whole story. "Well, kid," Bill said at last, "you're not a townie anymore. Shake." And he put out his hand and gripped Martin's. "Have I been in a flat spin with Dad and all? I'll tell you this, Mart. There isn't many bush kids which would have done this as well. Many of them would have been sure they could find the Yetta and gone wandering on and on until they had been lost for good. Good on you, Mark. When I saw your smoke signals, I couldn't believe my eyes. Did Hero get home? Asked Martin. It was fine to be talking to Bill as man to man. Yes, last night. I knew then, of course, but I couldn't do anything. I was out at break of day, had no one to send for help down to the farms or anything. Didn't know which way you had gone. Didn't know anything. I ought to hate you worse than ever, but somehow I can't. In fact, everything's okay now, and I'm sorry for not liking you before. I'll show you how to handle a stock whip tomorrow if you like. He said it shyly, almost apologetically, looking aside into the fire. Will you really? Gasped Martin. Dinkum, said Bill, so Martin knew he would. Well, we had better be getting back. Dad and Penny weren't there when I left, but they may be by now. But we can't possibly get home tonight, can we? Can't we just? Said Bill. He began to trample the dying fire into the ground, so that there wasn't as much of a spark left. Put on your shirt and grab your rifle. Wait till I take you in hand. He swung himself into the saddle. Hop up, Mark, he said, freeing a stirrup so he could climb up to the big mare. Hang on to me, he said. He spoke to the mare, and they started off. Martin sat bareback behind the saddle and held on to Bill. They moved off into the black bush where Martin had been lost in broad daylight. He couldn't believe this night journey was possible, but neither Bill nor his mount seemed to have any doubts. They went ahead steadily, now along crests, now descending into gullies, now climbing again. The mare made her own pace. She seemed to have a cat's eyes, for she avoided low branches and scrub and trees as if the sun was shining. Martin felt very happy. It was something to be treated as an equal by a chap who could find his way through a bush in the dead of night. At last, against the stars, Martin saw poplars. Though they had been riding for hours, he couldn't believe his eyes. That's not Tangrari, Bill, he said. If it isn't, we're bushed, Mark, laughed Bill. Though he sounded pleased with himself, you couldn't blame him for that. As they cantered across the home pasture, Bill glanced about. Good, they're not back, just as well. Getting late now. Old Marjorie will have some tucker. Turn in as soon as she had it. I got a few things to see, having been out all day. He jumped down and threw the reins over the picket fence outside the house. Martin scrambled down too. He still couldn't believe that they were really back at Tangrari. I'm sorry for being such a fool, Bill, he said with a bit of a lump in his throat. Forget it, Bill said, giving his shoulder a heavy thump. I'm only glad you are so sensible. Dad wouldn't have given me a tanning if he had come back and found the crows picking your bones back in them there hills.
Adventurelands, pages 117 through 124.
So singing, timing the speed of his horse, Raleigh arrived at the bridge as the dog drew near. He went on, pretending not to notice it. The dog halted as if to let him pass at first. Raleigh did not turn his head. Instead, he weighed the pieces of liver in his hand so the scent scattered in the air. Unconcernedly, he dropped one. Then he passed over the bridge. Half turning his head, he looked to see what the dog would do. By the bridge, Lassie slowly went to the piece of meat. Her hunger drove the saliva glands to work, and her mouth filled with wetness. She walked nearer. She bent her nose to touch the meat. But training of years was there too. How carefully had Sam Caraclaw had taught her not to pick up strange food. He had done that by dropping small pieces of meat at various places, and in the meat had been put cores of burning red pepper. As a pup, Lassie had started to eat those bits and discovered that they contained what seemed to be balls of living flame. However, as her mouth burned, she had been scolded by the mouth of her master. It's a cruel, hard thing to do, Sam Caraclaw had told his son Joe, but it's the only way I know that can teach 'em, and I'd sooner have a pup taste hot pepper than have raised a dog dying of poisoned meat by some madman that's thrown it to it. And that lesson stayed with Lassie. A dog must not eat stray bits of food. Her nose trembled. She nuzzled the piece of liver. Suddenly she wheeled. She left the piece of meat and crossed the bridge. Ahead of her, Raleigh Palmer by his wagon nodded his head. A good tyke and a well-brought-up one, he said, but we'll see. He walked on singing, but still waving liver in the air. In that smile of desired food, Lassie now traveled. Once over the bridge, her impulse was to leave the road again, but she did not want to leave the trail with the sweet-smelling food. She trotted along and began traveling slightly to the rear. Raleigh Palmer sat merrily to Toots in the seat. There's a tyke that's shy and canny, but I think she's coming near. Aye, she may be fearful canny, but we'll overcome her fear. How's that for a rhyme, Toots? And you'd like a companion. Well, we'll see. So Raleigh Palmer traveled along his road. Sometimes when he turned his head, he could see the collie in the fields behind him. Sometimes she was lost to view, but always she would be back again, drawn to the scent of meat, following it steady. And each time she would come a bit nearer to the wagon and the man who seemed not to pay not the slightest heed to her. When the sun was high, Raleigh Palmer pulled off the road. He saw the dog halt behind him. Time for a bite, Toots, he said. Quickly he set up a small brazier and built a fire. He boiled water and made tea. He warmed over a pot of stew. He cut up liver and put it down in a bowl for Toots. He ate. All the time he watched the collie drawing nearer and nearer. He made a show of feeding bits of food to his little dog. He saw the collie now sitting only 20 feet away, following with its eyes every move that his hand made. Toots barked at her shrilly once or twice, but Raleigh quieted his pet promptly. When at last his meal was done, he rose. Now, he said, we know a trick or two, don't we, Toots? And we'll see whether you'll eat or not. He took from his stock a flat bowl. He filled it with bits of liver. As unconcerned as if it was something he had done every day for years, he walked up halfway to the collie and set the bowl down. There's your dinner, he said. Eat it up. Lassie watched him go back to the brazier. Then, as he seemed to be taking no notice of her, she rose from her sitting position. Slowly she walked to the bowl. A dog must not eat stray bits of food, but this was different. It was set out in a bowl. That was it. It was in a bowl. When a bowl or plate was set out by a man, that meant a dog could eat without fear. There would be no living fire inside the food. Gently, Lassie dropped her head. With her front teeth, she lifted a piece of meat. She snapped it upwards. Then, in the joy of eating again, she tore into the bowl. She cleaned up the bowl. She licked the bowl itself. Then she sat, looking at the man as if to say, well, for an appetizer, that was all right. Now where's the real meal? Raleigh shook his head and spoke out loud. Ah, no, you'll come along with me if you want more. Didn't I say we're learning a thing or two about tykes, Toots? Well, up and we get and on our way. He took off Bess's nose bag. He tipped his brazier and stamped at the fire carefully. Snugly he stowed everything away. All the time, from the corner of his eye, he saw the collie, sitting as if waiting, and then, when at last he was on the road again, Raleigh Palmer grunted happily, for the collie was traveling with him, not in the field now, but close behind the van. It was not too close, but Raleigh didn't mind that. That would come later, he very well knew. Days later, Lassie was with Raleigh Palmer. She trotted behind the road, always a few feet behind the pottery van. She never liked the banging and shouting as they came into villages, but it was as if she put up with it, knowing it could not last long. She was as content as long as Riley went south. Once at a fork in the road, Riley turned his van east. Some sense told him part of his animal family was missing. He looked back. Lassie was sitting at the road junction. Every time he called to her, she came a few steps. Then she circled, went back, and sat down. Finally, Riley threw up his hands. He climbed to the seat of the van, turned Bess around, and started south to the other fork. I can just as go well round Godsey as well by Minlip, he said affably. It was a good life, traveling along the quiet, empty lanes of the North Country, far from the main highways of the trucks and the lorries, and the motor cars went racing along. And Riley sang as the miles passed. Well, Your Majesty, shall us common folks do a little vulgar business? Riley addressed the words to Lassie behind the wagon. She walked along, giving no sign of having heard. You know, Your Majesty, Riley said humbly, it does hurt your royal ears to hear me speak of such things as money. But us humbler folks has got to live, so if you don't mind, me and Toots will earn a little money. Delighted with his own make-believe, Riley lifted a cap to Lassie and bowed low. Then he turned to his wagon and went down the largest bowl in his staff. He banged loudly as he approached the first house. The bell-like din echoed in the village. Bowls and pots, I've got lots. Bring your penny or you won't get any. Bowls and pots. The women flocked to the doors, and Riley greeted them. He halted his wagon by the village center as the housewives fingered his wares and argued and joked about prices. They're so strong you can't break 'em, Riley chanted. I broke one I got from you last year, a woman cried. Well, I have to have 'em break once in a while, Riley said with his eyes gleaming. If I made 'em absolutely unbreakable, you'd never want any new ones, and I'd do myself out of a job. He winked broadly, and the women screamed with laughter. Now, Riley said, when the buying was done, who wants to see the tyke do a few tricks? The children yelled and clapped their hands. Riley got out the equipment from the wagon and set it up. Toots scrambled nimbly from the seat. Riley clapped his hands, but nothing happened. The little dog sat waiting. What's the matter? Riley said. You're waiting for someone. I see. Her Majesty hasn't arrived for the command performance. Why, here she comes now. Carefully trained by Riley, Lassie strolled before the crowd and sat down. Riley gave her a piece of liver as her reward. Well now, Her Majesty's here at last, so we can begin. Can't we? Riley pattered on. As the signal with his hand, Toots barked excitedly and began her tricks. She jumped through hoops. She told how old she was by barking. She played dead dog. She picked out the prettiest girl in the crowd, all by Riley's hidden signals. Then she ended with her best trick, walking on the ball of wood while she carried in her mouth a tiny national flag. Doesn't the collie do aught? A child cried. Why, you wouldn't expect royalty to perform, would you? Riley answered. But it does seem like she's on a sit-down strike. Riley advanced to Lassie, carrying Toots in his arm. Would you like to do some work? He asked. Lassie sat unblinkingly. Would you like to pick up things after the star is finished? Pick up those things, Riley ordered in a thunderous tone. Lassie did not move, and the children screamed happily. Riley scratched his head in mock dismay, then his eyes brightening. He held up his finger to the children, then he turned up to Lassie. May it please your Majesty, but as a favor to me, would you please pick up the things? This time he gave the signal with his hand, for the words had no bearing on the trick. And Lassie rose proudly. She pushed the wooden ball with her slim muzzle to the van. She picked up the hoops one by one and set them in a pile by the door. Riley bowed to her. Lassie curtsied, stretching her front legs forward stiffly as a dog does after it's been sleeping. You see, Riley said to the children, always remember to say please and you'll get more in this world. Well, off we go. Don't forget Peddler Palmer the Potter. I'll be back next year. Goodbye.
Adventurelands, page 383 through 388.
Presenting contestant number 7, said Jim Loudermilk, Mr. Jefferson Applegate of the Cumberland Mountains. Hearing this, Amalia forgot about Mr. Golightly and looked back to the platform in a hurry. Sure enough, there stood Uncle Jeff. He stepped to the railing and asked the crowd a question. Will you think a little of me if I take my coat off? The crowd said no in a variety of ways. Take it off and throw it away, cried a boy in the trees. Uncle Jeff grinned and handed Mr. Loudermilk his fiddle and bow so he could make himself comfortable. Wow, exclaimed the fat man, your friend Applegate sure makes a colorful picture, don't he? Amalia giggled. What the fat man said was true. With his green trousers, pink striped shirt, blue arm garters, and that dot and striped tie that made Amalia's eyes almost cross, Uncle Jeff looked a good deal like an Easter rabbit. I'll try to play you the first tune my granddaddy ever taught me, Uncle Jeff told the crowd. I've been playing it for 64 years and haven't wearied of it yet. It's that old cackling hen. Amalia hopped with delight, for this piece was her favorite. She had spasms every time Uncle Jeff made the bitty cluck and squawk. When Uncle Jeff finished that piece, she wore her hands out clapping for him. Uncle Jeff fiddled 2 more pieces. First, Injun at the Woodcock. The tune went so fast that Amalia could hardly see the bow shooting up and down. The fat man said, that's a better number than his first one. Got more to it. Uncle Jeff's third piece was Doc and Sally. He felt so good that as he played it, stamping his feet, he sang a stanza and made everyone laugh. Folks cheered and whooped, and there were cries of give Applegate the prize. Amalia looked at her brother. Cody was applauding as hard as he could. He was grinning from ear to ear. When the crowd got quiet again, Jim Loudermilk said, we judges have been studying the wind conditions, and we unanimously agree that the man from Mossy Ledge is entitled to another try. Well, Amalia and everyone else looked over where the steps were. Here came Mr. Golightly all over again, smiling as if nothing had gone amiss. This time his troublesome beard was already parted in back of his shoulders. Got it fixed good, Bart? Someone in the crowd asked. The old man said, my little great-granddaughter taken care of me. She said I ought to have no more trouble. She turned around. Amalia and about 80 more people took the giggles, for the 2 ends of Mr. Golightly's beard were tied together with his great-great-granddaughter's pink hair ribbon. I believe I can now safely undertake that piece I tried before I didn't finish, Mr. Golightly said. He began Soapsuds Over the Fence. It was lovely music, much as Amalia doted on Uncle Jeff's cackling hen. She admired Mr. Golightly's soapsuds more. Some seemed to Amalia that Mr. Golightly was out-fiddling everybody. Mr. Golightly played 2 more numbers, A Soldier's Joy and Cripple Creek, and then the great 4th of July contest was over. Jim Loudermilk's face was the longest in sight, and there were dozens of long ones. I know we'd all be happy standing on until dark listening to his rare treat, Mr. Loudermilk told the crowd, but lots of us has got cows to milk, chickens to feed, and pigs to tend to, and wood to fetch. He shook his head sadly. According to what Jeff Applegate tells me, Mr. Loudermilk went on, we got another fiddler you will enjoy hearing. While we're making up our minds about the prizes, I'm going to ask Mr. Cody Capshaw to step up on the platform. When Amalia heard this, she got a lump of excitement in her throat and nearly choked. She looked around for Cody. Milt was standing alone. She looked up to the platform. Sure enough, there was Cody, only about 24 inches high as he stood beside long Mr. Loudermilk. He's my brother, Amalia informed the fat man, but she was so excited she didn't say it loud enough. The fat man asked Cody a question. Youngster, I see you got a bow. Where's the rest of your outfit? Our cow ruined it, Cody said. Cody didn't intend this answer to be a joke. When folks finished laughing, he said seriously, what I told you is true. I made me a fiddle, and yesterday our cow put it on like a fancy hat. I'd be proud to play you all a tune, but I'll have to ask one of you musicians to lend me something to play it on. Mr. Loudermilk handed Cody a fiddle that someone had passed to him. Loan me your rose in a minute, Mr. Green, if you be so obliging. Mr. Green, standing next to Milt, handed Cody a chunk of rosin through the railing. Cody began scooting his bow over it. Reckon I'll play you Old Joe Clark, he said. Cody hadn't fiddled many notes of it before the boys in the trees began cheering. He sure got it, one of them collared. Come on, Capshaw, another one cried. Cody dragged his bow like he was dragging a lawn chair over a hill. He stomped the beat so you could hear him half a block away. When Cody finished, the crowd went wild. Play it over again, someone shouted. Give us Alabama Gals. Play Fire on the Mountain, Run Boys Run. How about Sourwood Mountain? Everyone wanted another tune. Jim Loudermilk gave Cody the go-ahead sign, so Cody put his bow and did his best to please. Cody finished his second piece, and Mr. Loudermilk had to raise his hand and beg for quiet. Going to say the name of this fiddler again, he told the crowd. I want you to remember it. Cody Capshaw of Cumberland Mountain. I'm going to ask this young man's sister also if she plays. Whereupon he looked over the railing. In that buzzsaw voice he said gently, Miss Capshaw, do you play? No, sir, Amalia said, wishing she could quickly turn into a beetle under a leaf so no one would see her. Mr. Loudermilk's face became extra long. Oh, too bad, he said. Maybe next your brother will teach you so you can play for us next 4th of July. Yes, sir, Amalia said. Next time my brother says frog, I'm going to jump. The fat man and Mr. Loudermilk laughed, and Mr. Loudermilk said to the crowd, I'm going to repeat that remark so you can all hear it. Mr. Capshaw's young sister says the next time our brother says frog, she's going to jump. Everyone rocked with laughter. Amalia wished she hadn't said it. She felt so foolish with everyone laughing at her. Before we turn Mr. Capshaw loose, Mr. Loudermilk went on, I believe many people would like to ask him the same question that occurred to me, and that is, Mr. Loudermilk lowered his chin to look down at Cody. How come you're such an expert? I believe these young people here and the ones listening on the radio would be interested. All right, sir, let's hear. Cody grabbed his hair and tugged it to help himself think. Also, he worked his toes in his shiny shoes. He figured he might hint on the reason if he started talking, so he said, Well, I reckon having a teacher like Uncle Jeff is better than half of it, and I reckon the rest of it is having a natural craving for his music. Mr. Loudermilk was delighted. A natural craving for music. Mr. Capshaw, saying that puts you right in with these big fellows like Applegate and Bart Butley and George Green. The judges were ready to announce the winners. Denville McDermott, the one with the ear trumpet, did the talking. Been judging this affair since 1927, he said in a dry, crumpling paper sort of voice, and truly believe we have never heard the talent we have heard today. In 1932, I sat here and watched Clyde Skinner would hold his fiddle upside down and draw sweet strains from it. In 1943, I saw Jerry Cook play left-handed. 3 years ago, the best man was Marlon Thomas playing that cigar box fiddle. But ladies and gents, girls and boys, today's a bunch of fiddlers is the best yet. Mr. McDermott was a happy man. He consulted the paper in his hand. Now the prizes will all go home and be back here 1 year from today, rain or shine. Mr. McDermott began reading from his paper. For top-notch double note playing, third prize goes to George Green. For general all-around excellence, second prize to Jefferson Applegate. For being the best beginner we judges have heard in years, special honorable mention to Cody Capshaw. And for being the finest and longest playing fiddler in Tennessee, first praise to Bart Golightly.
Boys and girls want him, and they all